all of Black Ops 2's ARs and LMGs on round 50. Let's go. The first gun up on the chopping block is the FAL, or the FAL, doing 160 to 130 damage with a 4x headshot multiplier. One upgraded to the Win, it does 240 damage to 180 with a 5x headshot multiplier. It gets a scope and a 3-round burst instead of the single shot fire action. And on round 50, this thing isn't going to do much. It's like pretty much any AR, it's going to do decent, I suppose. Actually, I really don't know since it's a 3-round burst, but I wouldn't personally use it, but it could get you a kill or two. Second up is the Galil, doing 150 to 100 damage with a natural 4x headshot multiplier. Now, when upgraded to the Lamentation, it does 220 to 150 damage with a 5x headshot multiplier. And it also gets a scope, which I completely hate. I mean, the scope, just not good. Now, on round 50, it's going to do something. It's not going to do a lot, but you will be getting kills just because, of course, you're going to have that ammo. Basically, World at War tactics. You dump enough bullets into it, it's going to die eventually. Now, here's a gun that I feel like it's been slept on. The MTAR does 140 to 100 damage with a 4x headshot multiplier. But for some reason, I just don't believe these stats. I feel like it does more, because I feel like when I get it, it hits hard. Or maybe that's just me liking the name. Now, when Pack-a-Punch, this thing does turn into the Metabolite Taxonomic Anodized Redeemer. And it does 195 to 150 damage with a 30 magazine size. I just realized I've not been saying the magazine size, so here we go, quick run. I'm going to tell you all the magazine signs that I've missed. Okay, so here we go. The FAL has 20 base and 30 pack punch, and the Glue has 35 pack punched and base. So there you go. Sorry I missed those two. Moving on over to the Type 25, it does 110 to 70 damage with a 4x headshot multiplier. It carries 30 in its magazine and 150 in stock. Now, when upgraded to the Strand 25, it does 160 to 110 damage with a 5x headshot multiplier with 30 in its magazine and 270 in reserve. And this thing's a lead cannon, so if you can get the ammo, big if, it will kill a few zombies just because you're spraying so many bullets at it at once, especially with Double Tap 2.0. The M8A1 has 100 to 80 damage with a 4x headshot multiplier. It's a 4-round burst. It carries 32 in its magazine and 192 in reserve. Now, when upgraded to the Micro Air Tour, I think I pronounced that correctly. Hopefully I did. But when upgraded to that, it does 150 to 110 damage with a 5x headshot multiplier. It has 336 in reserve with 42 in the magazine when upgraded. Now, on round 50, it's going to be getting a few kills, just like the FAL. Once again, it's a burst weapon, so you don't get that fire rate, but it does more damage than the FAL. So I guess it will be getting more kills than the FAL. Theoretically, that is. Now, I can assure you the SMR is not going to get more kills than the FAL in any playbook whatsoever. The SMR does 80 to 60 damage with a 3x headshot multiplier. And when it's pack-a-punched, it turns it into the the Smiler, with 120 to 110 with a 4x headshot multiplier. This gun is absolute rubbish. It carries 20 in its magazine base, 30 pack-a-punched, and it carries 420 in reserve when upgraded. Yeah, no, it's a bad gun. If you're using this on round 50, please consider what you're doing. Next up, we have the M14 that does 105 to 80 damage with a 3x headshot multiplier. It carries 96 in reserve with 8 in its magazine. And when upgraded, it becomes what, the Mnesia? It looks like a misspelling of like amnesia without the A. Anyways, it does 200 to 150 damage with a 6x headshot multiplier. And it carries 192 in reserve with 16 in its magazine. Now, on round 50, this is a theoretical gun that you could get to infinite number of rounds with. Kinda. Like, it does low damage in like the senses of a wonder weapon, but for these rifles, that's not bad. 200 damage is not bad. Anyways, like I was saying, it could take you to infinite number of rounds because you will always be able to rebuy ammo. Now we have the AN94 doing 120 to 75 damage with a 4x headshot multiplier. It has a magazine size of 30 and it carries 300 in reserve. Now, when upgraded to the Actualized Neutralizer 94000, It does 200 to 160 damage with a 5 times headshot multiplier. It has 50 in its magazine and 600 in reserve. Now the AN is the one gun I truly do believe you could get to round 50 with fairly easily, just because it's an AR, it's good, fully automatic, and on buried you can pick wherever you want to put it, so I think it would be an easy round 50 with it. The Scar H does 210 to 100 damage with a 3.5 headshot multiplier. It carries 30 in its magazine and 270 in reserve. Now when Pack-a-Punch, it does turn into the Garthan Reaper that does 300 to 150 damage with a 4 times headshot multiplier. It gets 40 in its magazine and 440 in reserve. One of the better ones, really. On round 50, of course, this isn't a wall weapon, but it will put in work, trust me. I felt like these zombies were dropping a lot easier than most of them. Now here's a returning classic, the STG-44, that does 120 to 70 damage with a 4 times headshot multiplier. Of course it carries 30 in its magazine and 210 in reserve. And when upgraded, it turns into the Spaz 44-7 Plus with 200 to 140 damage with a 5 times headshot multiplier, 60 in its magazine and 330 in reserve. And on round 50, once again, it's a wall weapon, so theoretically you could get the infinite number of rounds, but I personally wouldn't recommend using it, although it does kind of have the same stats, a little less than the M16 and the AN. Now we have the AK-47 that does 150 to 100 damage with a 4 times headshot multiplier. It carries 30 in its magazine and 240 in reserve. And when upgraded to Revnov's Revenge, it gets 250 to 200 damage with a 5 times headshot multiplier. It gets 30 in its magazine and 270 in reserve. And yeah, it's a cool gun, don't get me wrong, but the fact it's not a wall weapon, I feel like I go through ammo very quickly with it. So you could get a couple kills on round 50, but it wouldn't be the best. We have the Colt M16A1 that does 100 to 70 damage. It's a 3-round burst with a 4 times headshot multiplier. It carries 30 in its magazine and 120 in reserve. And when upgraded to the Skull Crusher, it does 150 to 100 damage. It does a 5 times headshot multiplier, and it carries 30 in its magazine, 270 reserve, and gets a attachment that shoots grenades. And it's a wall weapon, so once again you could theoretically get to infinite number of rounds, but the damage is just not there. Like the M14 and everything, it had the damage. The AN had the damage. The Spaz, it has the damage, but the Skull Crusher just doesn't. Now we have the M27 that does 150 to 100 damage with a 4 times headshot multiplier. It carries 30 in its magazine and 240 in reserve. And when upgraded to the Mystifier, it does 220 damage to 150 with a 5 times headshot multiplier. Carries 30 in its magazine still, but it carries 360 in stock. And of course this is on one map in Black Ops 2. And like past round 30, it's not gonna do much. I'm gonna be real. Just because it's not a wall weapon and you can't constantly go back and buy ammo, it's not that good, really. But on early rounds it hits, yes. Now moving on to LMGs, we got the MG08. Now this does 200 to 110 damage with a 3 times headshot multiplier. It has a magazine size of 100 and it has a reserve size of 400. Now when upgraded to the Magma Collider, it does 250 to 140 damage with a 3 times headshot multiplier. It keeps its 100 in the magazine but gets 600 in reserve. And it has a special effect where you shoot it and it ricochets bullets, causing extra damage. Now the LSAT does 190 to 150 damage with a 3 times headshot multiplier, has a magazine size of 100 and it carries 400 in reserve. Now when upgraded to the FSIRT, it does 200 damage just straight up, and it has a 3 times headshot multiplier. It still carries 100 in its mag, but it gets 600 in reserve. And once again, since it's a wall weapon, I believe you could take this thing to very, and I mean very high rounds, because it's a wall weapon on Buried, and Buried's a very, and I mean very easy map. Now we have the gun that people sent literal death threats over, the Hammer, and it does 190 to 120 damage with a 3 times headshot multiplier, has a magazine size of 125, and it carries 375 in reserve. Now when upgraded to the Sludge Hammer, it does 250 to 190 damage, it has a 3 times headshot multiplier, has a magazine size still of 125, and it gets 600 125 in reserve. I don't know if this one really counts as an LMG, but I'm just gonna add it. The Death Machine does 220 damage to 150. Its fire rate, dear God, is 1,200 rounds per minute. It has a magazine size of 150 and it carries 300 in reserve. Now when upgraded to the Meat Grinder, it just does straight up 350 damage with with a magazine size of 550, and then reserve it has 550. This thing's an absolute monster. I mean, if like high round killing is very easy. It won't take you to high rounds because it doesn't have that ammo. At least like the magazine size ammo. But it is a very good gun on round 50. Now last but certainly not least, we have the RPD doing 140 to 100 damage with a 3 times headshot multiplier. It keeps 50 in its belt and it carries 400 in reserve. Now when upgraded to the relativistic punishment device, it does 180 to 140 damage with a 3 times headshot multiplier. It carries 125 in its belt and 170 in reserve. And that's the video, so thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see ya.